All right. Well, good morning, Greg. It's already been a very busy morning and a busy week
Eh,
since we've got a lot going on.
we
So
do.
so that's why we had a little delay by a week in putting on a podcast episode. So thanks all of you for tuning into this one and hopping back on board. But we will continue putting out the podcast, and we just have to fit it in between the margins of everything else we have going on. But that's a good thing, and it's a good time to have that. So we're happy and excited that things are opening back up again. So today's discussion, Greg, is something we've gone back and forth about, but we're going to be talking about school shootings, school shooters,
Yep.
but kind of specifically with some of the legal ramifications, and we'll get into it. But a lot of this too discussion is kind of inspired by the more recent school shooting last November in Michigan and what happened there. But I kind of wanted to sort of give my thoughts up front in general about
Of
this
course.
stuff and the reason why I get so heated and emotional and pissed off and angry. Even in our last training course the other week, I kind of went off on a tangent. These federal agents will be like, "Whoa, dude, calm down. What are you talking about?" But
Exactly.
it's because this school shooting stuff is not nearly as complicated and complex as everyone wants to make it out to be. I think that if I was looking at security and trying to prevent something like this from happening, a school is it's a closed system, right? It's not a complex environment. Yes, it's complicated, but there's set schedules, there's set people. It's the same people every single day over time for years, sometimes K through
Yep.
12 at the same
Yep.
school, right? So you have this behavioral baseline for people. You know what's normal and what isn't normal. You have the ability to conduct analysis over time to interpret and understand trends or make conduct predictive analysis. Like you
Hmm.
can do all of that stuff, and you can immediately know whether you're right or wrong. You can immediately test your hypothesis with a low calorie intervention. And what I'm getting at is all of these school shooters, every single case to us and the way we look at things with human behavior, they're exactly the same. So meaning if I took all the things every school shooter said or their drawings, right, and I put them all in a book, and each one was a different chapter in that book, and I gave you that book to read, you wouldn't know that each chapter was by a different author. You would think that it was the same person because it's the same
Certainly.
persona, it's the same thing every single time. Yet it continues to happen. Now, reasons why it continues to happen, there are a number. Everyone wants to throw in their opinion of why it is, which is why we're having this episode, because
It's
some
a
of it falls down to responsibility. It falls down to different legal reasons why some of these things haven't been prevented. Meaning, I referenced the Oxford Township shooting in Michigan, where the kid Ethan Crumbley was in the principal's office with the gun in his backpack in that office. And based on everything that they had seen, even just that day, even just if they didn't
yep.
know anything about Ethan Crumbley for his entire life, all they had was observing of what they saw that day. It was enough reason to search through his stuff. Had they searched and gone through it, had they gotten involved, directly involved, think about that as an overarching kind of theme, getting directly involved and took action, they likely could have prevented that from happening. They could have saved lives. And this is what frustrates me so much and gets me so angry, because still in 2022, even though how many decades of school shootings have gone on, yes, they are statistically almost non-existent, right? They're very, very rare. Meaning, if I took the number of schools in the country, multiplied that by the number of days of school in the year, you'd get some number, and then the that would be what the denominator, right? Or the
Certainly.
numerator would be how many school shootings there were. It's very, very, very small amount, but the impact of them is so significant. It should be the most important thing. Meaning, it's not like someone being late or missing school for a week or dropping out of a class that has immediate and potential long-term effects. But a school shooting is rips a community apart and rips a nation apart. I mean, everyone feels that when they see it happen. It's awful. So that's kind of my initial thoughts on it. But Greg, we did want to focus on
Yeah.
some of the responsibilities of school, where this fits in legally with someone could say, well, we can't go through and search everyone. We can't do this. And there's always a delicate balance between our civil liberties and our rights versus security, right? We have it really good here in the United States, which is why bad things can happen, is because we have an open and free society. We're not doing
Can't have it both ways. Exactly.
yeah, we're not doing the Israeli model where, oh, you
Yeah.
set a bag down for too long in an airport, we're just going to kill you. You know what I'm saying? Like we don't do that. We don't play by those rules. We have a more stringent standard. People and we have something called the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, which I'm a huge fan of. So that's why. But I don't want to get into the kind of that. It was just what legally, because I know a lot of administrators maybe feel like their hands are tied, or maybe they feel like they can't do anything, or we don't want to overstep our boundaries. We don't want to invade someone's privacy. Then we're going to have a lawsuit or something. So
no, you're spot on, Brian.
We go with what legal. Don't make up new rules. Stick with what works.
Plenty of rules.
What's on the book. So that's kind of my initial thoughts on this, Greg, and I want to throw to you to kind of narrow the focus down of everything that I brought up into what we are going to talk about, which is some of the legal side of this, right?
I totally love that. And Brian, folks, Brian was not trying to be pedantic when he called it the Israeli model. The Israelis have a team that combs the sand around their border every single day, a number of times a day, to find a footprint of somebody that might be sneaking in or sneaking out. And if you set your bag down at a bus stop or at the train station or at an airport, not only are you going to be suspect and they're going to blow the bag in place, but you may be shot and killed. Certainly in some areas, if you go up on a rooftop for any length of time, you could be shot and killed. Why? Because they got extreme security issues there. So the more extreme the security issue, the less freedoms the personnel that live in that environment are allowed, which leads us to Brian's point about the Petri dish. Not that Brian needs me to defend it, but I totally agree with him on this. It's a closed system, which means it's like Jell-O. Every time you poke it, there's a repercussion that you can read. But folks, write down the word consequences. There are consequences to your actions. And if you don't understand the law behind the consequences, you're going to be pissed off all day for the wrong reason. So I had a person write me, and they said, I can't believe that these students were strip searched over vape pens. So we're going to talk about vape pens. The school has a policy against vape pens. It's a written policy. It's been enacted. You can't have them. Possession of it will get you suspended. And guess what? Teachers do have the right to do a strip search. A school can strip search a minor without parental consent or the presence of a parent in any extraordinary circumstance, Brian. So if they feel the kid's got a gun or a bomb or a Molotov cocktail or any of those other things.
Yeah, okay? I'm sure you'd have to define what that extraordinary circumstance is.
So they say immediacy of the harm, okay, or the threat, the credibility of the source, all of these things have to come to play. So it's probable cause 101. But here it drops to reasonable suspicion as long as you have a credible source of the information. But a vape pen is a rule. It's like having a pack of cigarettes on school grounds that you're not supposed to. So what happened is here you had overreach. Here the teachers read New Jersey versus TLO, and they said, yes, I have the right to conduct a strip search. The 4-point standard, immediacy of harm or threat, reliability of information, alternatives to the strip search wouldn't have worked. You get what I'm trying to say? And we followed protocol because a female teacher came in and did it.
Right.
Brian, the big question is juice worth the squeeze. When you had two other companion cases, and I'll just throw them in for comparison. You had the companion case in Olathe, Kansas, just a couple of days ago. School resource officer assumes the kid's got a gun. 18-year-old student tells the student to come with him to the principal's office, and he wants to enact this search policy to find the gun. Kid now knows he's pulls out the gun, shoots the resource officer and the superintendent of schools, and then the school resource officer shoots him. Okay, listen, that was a situation where the school resource officer had the right to say, you freeze, get down on the ground. There was enough probable cause from the credible source to didn't have to be a strip search to find that gun. But then let's compare it to the one that you talked about with Ethan Crumbley. Crumbley's in the principal's office after making credible threats for 18 months, but certainly for that day. And he's got the gun in the bag and nobody wants to search him. Why, Brian? Because they don't understand the laws and the limits of the laws, right? I mean, doesn't that feel that we are not in look, you've got a border exception to the search warrant rule. You've got an exigency.
The Fourth Amendment.
Yes. Yeah. Do you see what I'm trying to say? So all the laws apply. apply. But if you don't know them, look, you have a lesser expectation of privacy at school. The kid doesn't have the right to refuse
So
you searching his bag.
so yeah, jump into what, because that was going to be what we should really excuse me, cover first is
Yep.
what is my expectation of privacy in school? Because there's a little bit of
Yep.
difference between public school and private school. A public school is a state institution run by
Yep.
the government,
Yep.
whether that's a county, state, local, whatever it is. It's a state, meaning the government.
Of
So it's
course.
taxpayer funded. So there's certain that's a little bit different than the private school down the street, right? So that's
Yeah.
a little bit
But
different, just in terms of what they can and can't
totally
do.
agree.
I think you technically would have more rights in the state institution probably than you would in the private school,
But
yeah.
let's do it this way. Okay. Let's see it from the view of different characters.
Okay.
So you're the school resource officer, you're a police officer sworn to uphold the laws.
Okay.
So you have a whole bunch of freedoms, no matter where it is that you're working, whether you walk into a 7-Eleven or a school or an airport or on the street. And if you have reasonable suspicion that rises to probable cause, you have a whole panacea of things that you can do, and people can object, but they can't resist you, Brian. You have the law to stop those people or open a bag or pull over a car or do those. Okay. Now, that doesn't change much when you come on school grounds. Do you get what I'm trying to say? Because you're a police officer sworn to uphold, and that goes with you everywhere. But now you're a teacher. Now you're a teacher and you see a kid outside the school. Okay. The police officer has a bunch more freedoms than you to contact that kid if he thinks something's wrong. You have none. Okay. Because you're not on school grounds anymore. So the law is that the expectation of privacy on a school grounds has to be balanced against the substantial interest that teachers and administrators have to maintain discipline in school grounds and classrooms. And that's got to be weighed in that environment where that danger could take
Right.
place.
So
but it doesn't extend outside.
They have to
school.
make the link that it somehow affects some
even order
inside the school, whether that's
exactly.
It affects the plumbing or it affects the
on school grounds. Exactly.
Right. Or how students are acting. It has to affect involve or interfere with some day-to-day operation of the school,
because
right?
they're justified to have a legitimate need to maintain an environment where learning can take place.
Right.
And that's in the law. Okay. So therefore, if you're 3 feet from school grounds and you're carrying a backpack, a school administrator can't walk across that 3 feet and enjoy the same freedoms that they have to search you on school grounds. You get what I'm trying to say? So the idea is that you have a bunch of freedoms on school grounds to have a lower standard, a reasonable reasonableness standard is much lower than in public even. Okay, so like a person walking down the street with a backpack on, a police officer has to establish probable cause to even go. Now you can go up and contact the person. Hi, how are you?
Yeah,
the person can say, I'm Mickey Mouse, kiss my ass, and walk off. You don't have anything. But in school, that doesn't apply, Brian. So the idea of rushing to the search for the vape pens and going to the point to have people get down to their underwear, then shake out their underwear in front of the female nurse seems ludicrous to me. Do they have the right to strip search? Yes. But did this meet the standard that we're looking for, the reasonableness standard? No, because they could have kept all those people in there. They could have called. It would have taken longer. Hey, I need you to come down, pick up your kid, find out if they got a vape pen or whatever. Or just take the thing saying, hey, we think it's a credible source. We're sending you home for the day. You get what I'm saying? Have your parents contacted. There could have been an alternative. And that's the whole idea. Was there an alternative to the strip search? And did they try those alternatives, Brian? And look, they didn't try anything in Ethan Crumbly, and it ended poorly, and people got shot. What are we thinking here, right?
So you have those two examples are opposite ends of the spectrum, right?
Yep.
One where they knew their rights
or should have known
what they could. Well, so in terms of the vape pen one, right? They
Yep.
knew what they could do. They understood the law, and then they wielded it in a manner that was unreasonable, I would say, right?
Yep.
It didn't meet the standard of what that they didn't meet the standard of the intent or purpose of that law, right? This was for something that yes, it's a rule, you can't have vape pen, but in 3 months that kid turns 18 and it's totally legal for them to do that anyway. You know, I mean, it's just it's a different case. Now, the Ethan Crumbly case where he's showing violent threats or saying violent threats, he's got the drawings that he had out and the screaming for help and the gun and this. And all these indicators here, he's acting out, and he gets sent to the principal office. That's the time when that law should be applied. So in that case, it's the opposite end, where maybe they didn't understand that law, they didn't know the rights they had, for some reason didn't feel that it was necessary to exercise the rights that the school has. And I wouldn't even just say the rights, that I would say the duty to protect the students
I
in
love
that
the duty.
school. I think that they're responsible, and they were negligent in that
Yeah.
case because they didn't do they it goes back to they knew or should have known, given what was seen, that that's more than enough to at least pull him out of class, search him, search his locker, get his parents in there, and go, you're not going
Right.
back to class today. Now, maybe you're coming back tomorrow. Maybe we do an
Precisely.
investigation and you're fine, but you're not doing it today. And this is that's the point. Is it goes beyond just what rights they have and can wield. It's what duty do they have, right?
Right.
What is
And,
it?
and there's the difference, Brian. I think therein lies the difference. So New Jersey versus TLO is the law we're talking about. Folks, look it up. Brian will post it on the site so you can take a look at it. But the idea is that it's got a two-pronged test. And so anytime you're talking about a school search, it says it's justified at its inception. In other words, the search itself is legal on its face. And then it's conducted in a manner that's reasonably related to the scope and circumstances that started this whole thing. So, for example, it's the elephant in the matchbox. If you're looking for an elephant on school grounds, it's unlikely you're going to find it in a matchbox. So what are you doing looking
Yeah.
there? Do you get what I'm trying to say?
Yeah.
So that's an easy one that everybody out there can understand. So let's look at this. Is a crime or a school rule being violated? This is the problem with the vape pens because it was a school rule. The second thing is we have a particular person or group of people that we suspect are committing a crime or a violation of school rules. We met that on vape pen, right? Then the suspected criminal law or school violation has physical evidence that's associated that may be lost if we don't intervene now. We don't want the destruction of evidence. You get what I'm trying to say?
Yeah.
And it's likely that that evidence is found on this person or this group of people. So we're all doing great on the vape pen, okay? But the need, Brian, the need to do the invasive search, and again, when we say strip search, the argument here is, were they naked? No. Did any teachers touch their buttocks? No. But even me going down to my underwear, okay, and you're saying, yeah, but the kids swim at lunch, so they're in a swimsuit. Yeah, I get it.
Yeah,
but you're not
still,
the arbiter of that. You don't decide for me, right?
I decided to put the swimsuit on, not you.
But in this situation, had it been a knife, or had it been a gun, or had it been bullets for a gun, or an incendiary device, I don't think it would have ever made the news because it's all legal. But when it was a vape pens, which is clearly in that in New Jersey versus TLO, because it's a thing and it's a violation of school rules. This is where we go back to your private school. Private school can tell you, kiss my ass, you're done.
Yeah.
Because they have those rules. In a public school, you have to follow the law. And so the law gives the teachers the right to keep order and maintain order and enforce school violations. But Brian, did they need to go that extreme on this one when clearly we have to take a look at Olathe, Kansas, where the officer had every right in the world to expect that it was going to be gunplay, and it was in fact gunplay. Come on, we don't want to wait that long. Or Crumbly, you see what I mean on a spectrum?
Go back to the Kansas one real quick and explain that.
Yeah. So Kansas school resource officer is a sworn police officer that happens to be working at a school. He's armed. Okay. He's a savvy street cop that took additional training to be allowed to be in the school to protect the school. Now, his primary goal is that when crimes, not violations of school policy, haircut, this, okay, when there's criminal activity, he intervenes. So he gets word that this student, this 18-year-old student, has been talking crap and is carrying a gun. So he goes over, tells the kid, hey, you got to come with me. We're going to go see the principal. At that point, he had every right to pat that kid down for the gun, but he doesn't. He waits till they get to the principal's office and introduce them, says, hey, I've got witnesses that say this kid's got a gun. And then the kid goes, jiggers, it's up, pulls out a gun and shoots both of them. Okay. So now the school resource officer has to escalate his level of force and shoots the student. So my thing is, that's one extreme, Brian. That's an extreme where listen, clearly you had the probable cause to bring the kid down to the student's office. A pat-down search would have likely stopped the inevitability of the shootout. Okay, there's consequences when you bring a gun to school. Then we got Crumbly, who was on the other end of the spectrum, Brian, where he felt no consequences. He felt fine operating in his environment and bringing a gun to school and doing all this stuff. Why? Because every time he was caught, his parents backed him up, which is clear on the record, and his school administrators didn't go far enough, even though they were obligated to check his bag. And then in the middle, we got a school that's trying to do the right thing, the vape pen school. Do you get what I'm trying to say? And they went way over their authority. So why is it that we understand that now we have to have an AED in the schools to start a kid's heart, that we're whatever the fentanyl counter drug is, like Narcan.
Yeah, Narcan.
Okay, they're
Yeah.
having that in schools. They got no problem with that. But when it
Yeah,
comes
and
to
blast
understanding,
shields and trauma kits
so
and
so, but we still don't understand New Jersey versus TLO.
well, we still don't
What's the
understand the
wrong with
law
this?
and what you said a word. So obligated. What is it that
Obligated.
a school is obligated to do? Because,
Yes.
again, when these legal terms are defined, they are meant to be used as a framework to lay over a decision-making process or
Yep.
why you did something or articulate it. They
Yep.
are somewhat they're clear because they're written down, but they're open to interpretation because they have to be open to interpretation, right? So
Yeah.
here's that.
Sorry about that.
Yeah,
My head just
ripped it right off.
immediately shrunk.
No,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
but
but they're not when you listen. I just want to clarify one thing that you're saying to make sure everybody understands. Brian is not telling you that there's the spirit of the law
no,
and
no,
that
no,
there's a.
no.
What Brian is saying is it's open to interpretation. That's what the courts do every day. The
Yeah.
courts come in and say, here's the
Here,
charges, here's
here's
the suspicion, here's the exactly, and
yeah,
they weigh.
or where it gets where someone say tries to push back on or something goes to the Supreme Court. They say, okay, here's where you went wrong in interpreting this law, or
Yep.
here's where yes, because under this precedent, what you did fits underneath this law, so that gets adjudicated differently.
Yep.
But what I meant by that is like we just listed out all these different reasons
I agree.
of why someone the reasons for conducting a strip search on a student, right? You just
Yep.
listed all those out and what a search is and what that means, but what is the school obligated to do? Because this is my issue is that
Yep.
they're obligated. Do they have a duty to protect the students in that school?
Yeah, they do.
Yeah, right. Because we have things like fire drills. You have to go through a background investigation if you want to be a teacher to make sure you don't have some prior criminal conviction that could affect what you're doing. There's all these different things. So
Yep.
so there's different ways we have protocols in there.
Exactly.
But what is it like? Because that's
so let's talk
are
about
we
that.
not, has the legislation and what those rules are not caught up with the times, or what is it like?
So TLO, New
Yeah.
Jersey versus TLO is an 85 caper.
Yeah.
So it's in the time frame where people knew there was a need for it. And let me go back to street for a minute, okay? There is no requirement for the school to notify the parents that a search is taking place and that they're contacting the kid. But wouldn't you say that it's great school policy, whether or not the search, was properly accomplished? That's a legal thing. But
Mhm.
wouldn't it be great to know that the student's parents are going to be notified as soon as possible, or a call was made? So just because there's not a legal standard to do it doesn't mean you shouldn't. You see what I'm trying to say?
Yeah.
Because what you can do is
Right.
you can be
I
way
get,
left of
yeah.
bang and stem off all these problems. But let's talk about this in context first. Brian, you went to a bus station and you put a quarter in and you put some items in a locker at the bus station. Now, the bus station locker has less expectation of privacy than your home. Your home
Right.
has a whole bunch of protections,
Right.
but it's got a ton more than your school locker, because
Right.
your school locker is school property, on school property, in the school building. It's so the law says that any juvenile that's in a school, and it's different again when we go up above juveniles to like a college setting, Brian, but the same rules apply, because in a collegiate setting, if it's a public school, the standard is still probable cause. And what I mean by that is you got to balance the expectation of privacy against the interests of the teachers and administrators in maintaining discipline on the school grounds. They have a legitimate need to maintain an environment that is safe and where learning can occur. So when the law says that, that becomes a standard. So in the school bus terminal thing, or in the bus terminal thing, cop has to have probable cause. They have to go apply for a search warrant.
Yeah.
They're going to get it. No such standard on school grounds whatsoever. Your bag, your pocket, your person, your kid, okay, even if they're only violating a school policy, you get what I'm trying to say? And what do we see? We see Denver schools have a walkout because the kids disagree with it. Yeah, it's all good. You're a kid. I get it. But there's a law that governs that. So sometimes we get so hooked up in the egregious conduct of the people that are playing it that we don't look back to the law. So that's why I get pissed off about Crumbly, because the school knew or should have known that he had a gun, and they should have checked the bag, and they didn't. They were obligated to check the bag, and they fell short of their duty. Okay. So then we got Olathe, Kansas, where everybody did everything right, but they did it a little late in the game,
Yeah.
and the guy fired off some rounds. And then we got a little preliminary and a little draconian, in my terms, where
Right.
the vape pen. You see the balance that I'm trying to create, and the reason is I want every one of our viewers and listeners to come to their own reasonable conclusion on this. The conclusion is, Brian, the law is very simple, is very simply written, but the interpretation of the law by a person that's not a barrister or quickly without going to a judge or an attorney. You can get a legal opinion from attorney, Brian, and say,
Yeah.
we are faced with this situation. What would you do? And the attorney's going to go, let him go. It's a fucking vape pen.
Well, that's the point.
That would have been a,
what is likely to occur from not
Right.
searching this or not doing this? Well,
Yep.
I think in the case in the Kansas, we talk about, hey, someone talked about this person having a gun, or the Ethan Crumley
Yes.
cases, everything he's putting out. Those are so serious where it's like, hey, Susie has a vape pen. Okay,
Yep.
well, one, that's bad for your health and it's against school policy, but that doesn't affect the other students. That's not a threat to their safety. It might be a threat to her health, but that's her choice. Right?
But it's also a threat to the school rules. That's the way they viewed it.
And
we have a rule,
agree.
and
I
you
agree
violated the rule.
And
exactly.
rules apply to everyone, and they apply to everyone equally. However, the enforcement of those rules are different based on the situation at hand and based on what the potential breaking of the rule is. You're not allowed to bring a gun to school. That's a very different rule than you're not allowed to bring a vape pen to school, right?
So let me piss everybody off. Let me piss everybody off and go to George Floyd. Okay. So if they had another way of handling George Floyd, because you've got people out there right now going, yeah, he's a prior felon.
Yeah, don't care. His rights were violated. His constitutional rights were violated.
Because he had due process.
Yeah.
Do you see what I'm saying? He had the right. So what I'm saying, if you're a cop or a security guard or a teacher right now, and you take a look at the situation, and the inevitability doesn't have an outcome where it's immediately going to get a riot in the school and a violence and all those other things, because a rule violation could, like the Z thing with the Russian support for the Russians in the Ukraine right now. It's the letter Z. And so a Olympic person had that on her tunic, and they said, oh, we're going to strip you of this and you'll never play in the Olympics. Look, that's a rule violation. Okay. And as bad as it is, it's like giving the Nazi salute or, doing the mustache thing and thinking you'll get away with it. Brian, there's consequences for that. But the immediate consequences don't need to be a strip search, and you have to follow that balance. If it's like, for example, people don't understand because they're not paying attention to the right news sometimes. And I'm not calling anybody out, but listen to what I'm saying. There are school shootings every week. For example, there was a school shooting yesterday where 3 students were shot, and it was a drive-by.
Well,
car drove by.
Football games are a big one on a school grounds. Those are always happening. It's not, they don't get sensationalized or make the news.
But it's not a targeted shooter,
right?
Where it was an internal threat.
It's a fight between 2 groups typically, or 2 people, or a crime of a robbery. That the high school football season is like the deadliest time, because there's all kinds of shooting in parking lots. They happen everywhere, all across the United States. It barely ever makes news, but it happens constantly.
Now we're talking that there's a specific set of laws that if you prostitute or use drugs or have a gun on school property, whether the school's open or closed, whether within 1,000 feet or whatever your jurisdiction is. That's what I'm saying, Brent. We don't need more laws. What we need to do is understand the enforcement of those laws and what the consequences of those enforcement. If we underreport and undervalue threats, credible threats from witnesses, like there's a case that's going on that might be a companion case that you want to add to. There's a poor girl from a publicly funded school, and I believe it's in Florida, but I'm probably wrong. But it's one of those states that touch Florida. And the young girl's Instagram, I have no idea what that is, was hacked, and the person put credible threats on the Instagram as if it was that female. So the coppers came in, they arrested her, they searched the house, kept her in juvenile detention, and it was horrific, Brian. Yeah. But listen, the cops were on the side of right on this one because they had credible threats. That's the Florida school district right now that's calling. And the idea, sorry about that, gosh damn spam call, and I can't shut it off because I'm the only one in Colorado with a landline. But the idea is that poor girl endured, Brian, what she shouldn't have had to endure. But on the obligation of the balance between the interest of the school and safety and security in a safe work environment, and where learning can occur unimpeded, it was the right call to make. So listen, somebody's going to pay because there's some lawyer that's going to take the caper and make a good argument, but that's going to weaken the law. Because look at what we did with the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas shooter, where we
Yeah.
kept pushing him around to different places
Right.
because he had a mental illness that nobody addressed,
Yeah.
and he had all these signs, and then he ends up shooting. Brian, you said it at the beginning. We could name that tune in 3 notes. Why? Because they all start falling into buckets. And that's why Langman and all these other people are making money writing books about it and having their podcasts about it, Brian, because they can show us the buckets. But the idea is we're not doing anything with it. When we
No.
actually hear, feel, smell, or taste a credible threat, we're taking too much time with the gosh damn vape pen and not enough time saying, son, we have to open your bag. And that's what I'm trying to say here is that we've got echelons of security that are already set in place, but everybody's afraid to pull the metaphoric trigger, Brian, because they don't want to violate somebody's rights. This is one of those times where we have to take a step back and say, what's good for the greater number of people? And once we go from reasonable suspicion to probable cause, you have to act. You have to act first, and you have to act fast, or you're going to have trouble. I know you agree with that, but how do we make that obvious and palatable to the schools that are failing?
Well,
that are trying their best, and
so a
failing.
lot, and it's, I don't want to come across as bashing this. You've got so many other. What are the day-to-day problems in a high school in the United States?
Oh my gosh,
there's a lot.
yeah.
There's kids being kids fighting,
and there's threats all day long.
Threats
right?
all day long.
Yeah.
There's people not showing up for class. There's people staying later than class. There's kids who don't even have their families don't have enough money to feed them. You know what I mean? Like there's. So, and then let alone what are we teaching them and what are they actually learning and how are we measuring that? So it's not that I'm trying to downplay any of those issues or say that this is so glaringly obvious. It's not glaringly obvious. It is from us, from the outside perspective of what we do and how we do it. But it's not glaringly obvious to a lot of the faculty and staff and administrators. They feel like they're under attack because what happens
from everybody.
Well, they are, because so some teacher steps in and then they decide to search the kid's bag and he doesn't have anything, and then that kid is on TikTok that night with his parents complaining about this, that, and his civil rights were violated, and now that goes viral, and now that teacher is getting threats. Like it's an insane world. But you're gonna have to put up with that stuff. That stuff didn't happen at
noise, right?
Didn't happen as much and as at scale that it does now today. But it's always been there. There's always going to be the parent that comes in and no, there's nothing wrong with my kid, and their kid's the biggest asshole in the entire school, and everyone knows it, right? But that's always been there. So how we deal with it is that prioritizing this stuff, like. I even get what they're saying. Like I would understand the reasoning in some aspect of why we want to be hard on this vape thing, because rules are rules and we enforce every rules, and and I get it. I agree with that.
If we don't, we weaken all the rules.
And I agree with that, right?
If
you have a standard, you have to hold everyone to that standard. Otherwise, that standard is meaningless, and just take it off your list of things that you have. Take it off the platitude on the wall if you're not holding people to that and holding everyone to that equally. So, but things aren't black and white, right? And you do have you do have the authority and the power to exercise and enforce things as you see fit. So maybe in that school it's more serious of a threat because more kids in that school have access to firearms. Okay, well that's an environmental. That's something in that environment that's unique maybe to that area where that happens. So you can use that in your decision and your reasoning why you did something, right? And then you could do that for the vape pen search. I think they went too far with what they needed to do.
But I don't think they thought in the moment that they.
Oh, absolutely not. I guarantee.
And that's why you have to give the gift of time and distance. What am I doing and why am I doing it? And what are the likely consequences?
And what you don't hear, when these things come out, is that school has like the worst vaping, problem out of anywhere in the state. And some kid died 3 years ago because his vape pen gave him too much nicotine. I mean, like there's usually a legitimate reason for how you go down that path, and it starts small. and someone that has to go, wait a minute, what are we really trying to accomplish here? And I think that that question
Precisely.
alone is, what are we trying to accomplish here? And so that way, when the kid, hey, there's a credible threat of a kid with that might have a gun. Okay, what are we trying to accomplish here? Well, the immediate safety of every student in the school, right? That
Yep.
that has to be now immediate.
Yep.
Doesn't work on that on the vape one. It's like, okay, can we talk about this afternoon with this student? If we know they're doing it, what they're doing is breaking a rule, but it's not, it's the rule. Not all rules are as have the
Are
same
created equally. Yeah, I
have
agree.
the same level of severity to them,
Right.
right?
Right.
And when you try to wield the same, I think the same power in the same in a different set of circumstances, that's typically when you get case law, right?
So
Typically these
you're
things
exactly
come
right.
out when it's, no, you went too far in this case, or you know what I mean, because you're trying to apply this standard to this situation, and it didn't, the merits of this situation didn't warrant that response, right? It didn't
Yeah, yeah.
didn't necessary. So and this is not as complicated, I think, as it sounds sometimes.
So let me give you a couple of complications though, Brian. Here again, our age difference is going to create dissonance. And I'll give you this example. When I was in high school, if the girl got pregnant in high school, she dropped out of high school, and there was schools and areas
Yeah,
for wayward females.
yeah, it was a
Why?
different world.
Because
Yeah,
it was a different world. And
yeah,
guess what? We didn't want anybody getting the idea that pregnancy out of wedlock. Listen, Brian, that was Detroit 101. So
yeah,
now let me give you this. Lon, my dear neighbor Lanny, was born and raised in an area not too far from Gunnison, Colorado. And he gave the same experience as my dad and a lot of my friends' parents that I know now. And
yeah.
that was that on the way to school, they carried their Browning 16 gauge or their
Right,
single action 20
right.
gauge, and they hunted yotes or bunnies or pheasant for the family table on the way, and they kept it in their locker at school, and there was never any problem with it. And that's
Right.
why movies from that era, like what's the movie about the two killers that go and get the family at night in cold blood, Truman
Okay.
Capote thing. That's why back then people had the popcorn, and you had to be a certain age to see that movie, and they never showed any of the killing. They just told you what happened in the film, and the idea was, oh my gosh, I can't believe that. Brian, we came from an area where we don't truly, meaning my age and
Yeah,
older,
yeah.
don't truly understand that the average 11 or 12-year-old is probably sexually active when they never were, probably has access to pornographic communication or influences with drugs that we never ever had. I remember the kids smoking dope for the first time when I went to Metro Park outside of Detroit, and actually seeing marijuana and thinking, oh my God, I saw a film on that. Look at those evil kids. If we
Yeah.
only knew what
If
we
we,
knew now,
right, right,
right?
right.
So the
And
law has been around for a long time. This law for New Jersey versus TLO has been around since 85, and it's been challenged every day of every month of every year since then. But common sense rules tell us that reasonable suspicion has to build the probable cause. And then I would add the extra step of, even though it's legal, what are the likely consequences of my, and two-prong, action or inaction? You get what I'm saying? So I think
right.
I'm agreeing with you, but I'm just asking you to also understand that there's people like me out there that have to study a little harder because we don't understand what's the matter with kids these days, you know?
No, that's a great point. That and I think that highlights another issue with passing, hey, this is now going to be the rule. Well, man, like that doesn't work in some areas, right? So you can go to, in some, like, especially in major cities that have crime issues, like within that area of a school, like having a gun or drugs or something like
Yep.
that, if carries a higher sentence for that illegal activity in that
Yep.
immediate area than it otherwise would, because they've declared this is a school zone area. Kids walk up and down here, and so even outside of the actual footprint of the school, in that area will be some sort of enhanced law that says within this area. We're saying because they don't want dudes selling dope out on their front porch right in front of the school. You know what I mean? They don't want gang
Yep.
shootouts going on right there. So
You got to give the kids a chance, right? And you're
right.
exactly right. You
So
want to create that environment
but
that
now
they can choose.
but in Gunnison that wouldn't work, because
No.
people are like, wait a minute, like we all have rifles and we all hunt in here, and that's no, like, so what works in one, so you can make this law and everyone will
Yep.
slap the table and everyone will go,
Yep.
oh yeah, well that makes perfect sense, duh, we should do that, this will help. But then when you try to apply that to other places, we go, well, that doesn't work here. And we go, well, no, this is the rule. It's like, well, wait a minute. It's like
Right.
you can't, the same rules don't apply in the same way in every single area. There's
You're
differences.
exactly right. And that's why your earlier point was
Yes.
well taken, that listen, when you talk about how the law is adjudicated, that's where you clearly look at it, and the jury and the judge and the lawyers, that's their job to pick out those shreds that fit, and those threads
But
rather that fit and that don't.
my issue, and that's the legal side of fine. Like,
Yeah,
when it goes to court and it gets argued, that's your best case. That's like the scientific peer review process, right? That's where they're going to go
exactly.
battle it out and do that. But what I'm talking about is more so on that individual level at these administrators, teachers at these schools, where I they don't have a good understanding of. They might have know the rules, but how do you apply those rules? How do you enforce rules and laws?
And we're
And
talking about that.
that's
How
what we're
goofy that
talking
is.
about.
Yeah.
It's difficult, but it takes everything in our legal system is based on, the reasonable man theory,
Yeah.
the common sense approach, the
Yep.
what's the, and which is important, because you have to be grounded in okay, what are we really trying to accomplish here? What's the overall intent? What is the purpose
Certainly.
behind this rule? The purpose behind the vape pen rule is very different than the gun rule at a school, like completely like night and day, like not even the same
Right.
sport, let alone the same ballpark. You get
Right.
what I'm saying? But if it's in the list of the 25 rules we enforce here, it can bleed together, and we go, nope, now you all got to take your clothes off. It's like, wait, what?
When should you be looking at that then, Brian? I consider
Well,
you a subject matter expert and a peer. And when I ask you, when we look at it after it's occurred, isn't
yes,
that a little too late? You
yes,
know
of
what I'm trying to
course,
say?
of course.
So where should we intervene?
Because sometimes it's well, we obviously always bring everything back to training, because you can be told, I can brief you on the rules, Greg,
Yep.
but that's not enough. I have to
Yep.
explain, here's an example of when you would use this. Here's an example when you wouldn't use this.
Yeah, but we're not doing that. What
No.
we're doing is we're running around with paintballs in school,
Well,
showing an active shooter drill,
yeah.
and piling up chairs. You
So
get what I'm
that's
trying to say? But because we don't go to
well,
the
no,
critical
Greg.
thinking. You just talked about
The
critical
teachers
thinking.
in Oxford Township, they had their Alice training 10 days before that shooting. So there you go. Right, we got we got our shooting training. They did it 10 days, and this is why it pisses me off so much, is because that's a perfect example of said, hey, they went through this training. A week and a half later, a kid brought a gun to school and killed a bunch of people. So it's pretty easy to go, well, this training didn't work. This doesn't help us in this situation. But did that happen? No. People go, shit, we need more. Like, this is junk. This is what we're talking about. Our conversation right now has more value to a teacher and administrator. Now, maybe I'm just completely full of myself, some arrogant asshole that thinks that. But this conversation, yeah, that's
thank you, Brian. You're generally not that guy. So go on while you got the form.
So no, but this conversation is a perfect example of all you would have to do is come up and have someone from the school brief and go, look, here's an example vape pen situation where we went wrong. Here's an example, Ethan Crumbly, where we went wrong. Here's an example. Do we find one where we went right? This is how we apply these roles. Meaning, this is the intent.
And we briefed a school in Dallas.
That's
and
all
the school in
teacher Brian, or administrator, whatever need. They go, oh, I get it now. Here's
Brian,
the
school
what
in Dallas said
things.
We have so much in-service and pre-service training that
where
are we going to fit 4 hours to do constructive training like you're talking about? Part task training, Brian. You have a teacher.
They have days and weeks of checking the box online bullshit.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. So what I'm saying is that you could make a case that the school is negligent because the school is not creating adaptive learners and advanced critical thinkers. And I'm talking about from the student level, because you don't want to burden the student with thinking that there might be a school shooter. Well, you know what? All of that time you're spending, the kids reading more than you think they are. They already know there's that possibility. And your kid may be thinking of being a shooter. Why? Because I haven't been listened to, and I've got this whole thing about bullying. Bullying exists all the time. And I see a kid that committed suicide because of bullying, and everybody says, well, we're going to pass Mason's law or Julia's law or do any of this other stuff. What you guys are doing is trying to make yourself feel better.
Feel
And
better.
I
Yep.
feel horribly emotionally
Yes,
for
I
what you're
do.
going through.
Yeah.
But listen, the same bandwidth for criminality, the same bandwidth for school shooter, insider threat, suicide. These are broken humans that are reaching out and asking for help.
Yep.
Now, Ethan Crumbley's asking
He
for help in a
literally
very
said,
different
I need
manner.
help. He
I
wrote
need
on his
help.
fucking paper next
Right.
to his guns and his people dying and shooting. He
Okay.
wrote, I need help. Please
But do you
make
think
this
that was the
stop.
first time that he did it
Nope.
just before he pulled the gun? And the same thing when your kid comes home and you're asking them, how was your day? And the whole kid's demeanor is changing. People tell me all the time there were no articulatable or perceivable pre-event indications. Then go to the autopsy protocol. You take a look at those things. You take a look at the kid cutting, or you take a look at the kid that's dehydrated, or you take a look at the kid that dropped out from the school. There is rarely, if ever, a person that doesn't have a list of grievances before something happens to them.
Right.
And if you don't
Yeah.
build in the time to read them, or you don't know what you're looking for, Brian, then you can miss them. And then guilt steps in, and you can't afford, your human ecosystem does not let you look back and go, I saw all the signs, Brian. I saw every one of them and I neglected them. What would that make you? How would
Oh,
you
yeah.
live the rest of your life? Do you see?
Yeah.
So your protective chemicals in your brain that build on endurance, the human performance side of your brain, want to keep you alive. Okay, it's counterintuitive to want to kill yourself. Do you understand? So those signals must be out there. We just have to find and read the wavelength. So my thing is, application of law means you've already read the wavelength and you're now there. And now you're on the bubble, Brian.
Yeah.
You know?
And I think this, misunderstanding or not fully understanding the law will lead you to fear it. So they fear it in a
Yep.
lawsuit against them because they don't know the
Yep.
law. If you know what you can and cannot do, and you've trained for that, and you understand policy and procedure, and you can articulate, this is why I made that decision, there you have a leg to stand on. That's it. They can't come after you. If you fall
Yep.
underneath what was a legal precedent, now they can get a bunch of people together and say, well, now we're going to change it going forward. Well, great, then change it. Cool.
Exactly.
If that's
and
what you
call
want to
me
do,
when you've changed
yeah,
it.
and call
Because
me
all
and
of
let
the
me know what it is, and
all the noise is different.
I will change our rules to match the law accordingly,
Yes.
and that's
Yes.
it. And
Yes.
I think that's the problem, is we're not giving these the teachers, administrators, all that stuff, the confidence and the competence they need. Now they're going to push back and say, well, we also don't have the resources to handle every kid that says something and does it. Okay, I get it. Then you
be prepared to reap the whirlwind.
Yes.
Because you can't say that.
If that's what you're saying, then there should be a national outcry where every teacher, if every teacher in one of these major metropolitan cities just came out and said, look, we cannot do this. We don't, this isn't about our pay or our benefits, this is a broken system. This is an all stop right now because something bad is going to happen next. Well, that'll get some attention. Like you get what I'm saying? The idea is
exactly. So when you're saying, listen, I'm not going to pay attention to the car ahead of me without a blinker or that doesn't have a license plate light or a tail light. I'm willfully going to do that because justice is misapplied, and therefore it's going to give a greater chance for those that the justice has been previously misapplied to live their lives without this additional scrutiny. Get it? Yeah, I get the argument. But then what happens when the rear end fatal occurs and the insurance company comes looking and understands that your agency was the one that didn't enforce it? If it's not equally enforced, then guess what? It's not enforced at all. And so what I'm trying to tell you is the same thing applies to schools. The Ethan Crumbley case is going to change school shootings because of the lawsuits. And when you go all the way back to Sandy Hook, you take a look and they continually sued the gun manufacturer and finally got a huge payout from the gun manufacturer. Folks, it's your kid. Okay, it's not the gun, it's not the gun manufacturer, and I'm going to get hate mail for this, but it's your kid. Like if your kid commits suicide in the garage through carbon monoxide poisoning, okay, you're not going to sue the manufacturer of the automobile. Okay, but the idea is that, Brian, we have to take a common sense approach to schools. Schools are very dangerous places. They weren't always, but yeah, they kind of were, because there was movies back by Sidney Poitier and the Up the Down Staircase and all these other films about kids in trouble. And what's the one with gosh darn the Natalie Wood and the James Dean and the kid with the knife at the observatory, the Griffin Observatory.
Oh
That whole
yeah.
thing was about the kids gone wrong, and we can't control our kids in school. And you made a point the other day. Why doesn't this happen anywhere near the numbers at colleges? Why? Because kids have
The kids have
matured.
grown up.
Their brains have changed.
That's what
They've
I'm.
now understood the
That's the whole
consequences of
point.
their
Take it
actions.
any one of these that has ever happened,
Yeah.
and let's say we stopped it, and that kid, well, they grow up and their brain starts
Yeah.
to form, and they either, maybe they fix themselves, become successful, maybe they just do whatever. It doesn't matter. But
Maybe they get
if you,
help,
if you
right?
get, but and even if they don't, the likelihood once they get past that horrible fucking years of what, like 14 through 18,
And
once
they're
you get
horrible
to that,
for all of us.
yeah, for everyone, they suck. It's
Right.
supposed to be shitty. It's not a good time.
And
So
that relationship that you just made with your words, if I was sitting down with Nico and Andrea years ago, that's the words that I used with them. Everything blows. You're
yeah.
going to have your heart broken. Your
Well,
first date is not going to be the one that
but
you marry all the time.
if you can get
by,
them out, if you can get them out past age 18 and doing
yeah,
something like, well, they're less likely to go out and do that in society. I mean, they
yeah.
really are. Like after that point, they really have to put effort into wanting to do something like that,
And
and that's
normally
going to
they're
stick
found out.
out. That's what
Normally
I'm
they're
saying.
found
They're
out.
going to
You're
stick
exactly
out.
right.
So most people will grow out of it. I mean, hey, remember, I don't want to say the place or his name. Remember the kid in one of the courses not long ago at the place we
Yep.
keep going back to?
Yep.
And he was like kind of an odd person. And
Yep.
and
And
I
he
said,
had an odd
he
story,
had an
didn't
odd
he?
story. And I said,
Yep.
hey, why don't you go to wherever? And he sat down at a group of two big jacked burly SWAT
Yep.
guys, like, you know what I mean, totally outside of what this kid is, just had a conversation. We started talking to me. He's like, look, man, like I was the kid with a lot
Most
of
likely.
problems,
Yeah,
and,
exactly.
and it was me, and I was in myself mentally going to a bad place, and I didn't
Yep.
have friends, and I didn't do this. And he's like, I forced myself to change, and I forced myself to talk to
Brian,
people, and I forced, and you know what, man, that's a success. That
it's a
kid did, he
huge
did it on
success.
his own. He made a choice to do it. Now I know there's a lot of different contributing factors to that stuff and different circumstances for different people.
When
But the
we
idea is if I can push that along and get them to go, hey, once you get out of here, things are going to be a little better. It's like the little insurgent. I tell her when she goes, oh, that's unfair. I go, yeah, I get it. I go, this is completely unfair. You and I have to play by different rules. You have
Yep.
to do certain things that
Yep.
I don't, but I also have to do certain things that you know. Well, this is unfair. I go, we'll get used to it because I'm going to be in your stuff all the time, and I'm going to be asking
Yep.
you questions, and I'm going
Yep.
to be going, what's this and who's that and what are you looking at? Let me see your phone. So now after having that fight for a while, guess what? It's no longer a thing. It's now normal
It's
to her.
and the longer you do that, the less likely it will be that you get that phone call, Brian.
Yep.
And I'm telling you, when that student you were talking about at one of our courses is no different than we were teaching at JBLM, Fort
Yeah.
Lewis McCoy, and having people come up when we were talking about countering the effects of suicide and being able to call out people that are likely to, and people would come up to us at the break and go, that's me. How do I get help? Listen, your child, your coworker, your brother wants to tell you that they're having a bad time.
Yep.
But we get so wrapped up in the present that we don't slow time down, give ourselves the gift of a new perspective and say, what's on your mind? What's on your heart? Brian, if we stop to do that sometimes, we'll increase our the fidelity of our marriage. We'll improve our relationships with our kids, right? Am I lying?
It's like, you gave the analogy. I can't remember where you first used it, but I started using it. The old Popeye, the running dialogue. He's always complaining about something. And then the modern day is that movie Office Space, where the guy with the red swing line stapler, I'm going to burn this place down, is all humans.
They're not listening to me.
Yeah, we all have a running dialogue.
We do.
Everyone has one. So if I had the ability to literally stick something in my ear and point a microphone at you and hear what your inner dialogue is, I'd go, oh, I get it. I see what you're doing now.
Yep. The pulse of your brain, right?
But what I'm saying is that person is on transmit constantly. So I got to try and how do I tune into your inner dialogue? How do I know the difference between a kid who brings a gun to school because it's cool and he wants to show his friends, and he, got a new whatever for Christmas because his family is hunting, and then the kid who wants to bring a school and shoot someone. Those are two different people. They're going to give off they have two different running dialogues. They're going to
Yep.
give off two different signals. It's the same thing with the freaking vape pen. Like, what is this person
I get
trying
it.
to do
I get
here?
it. And we're beating that vape pen up only based on the fact that there's so many. Look, we got teachers sleeping with students. We got
right,
inappropriate everything.
students
So
beating up
I
other
need
students,
to help
assaulting
me
people,
understand.
fighting people.
Right.
Yeah.
And the problem is that when we make those equal arguments, Brian, we're going to miss the person that's the broken little snowflake, the crack in the Fabergé egg.
Yeah.
That's the one that we got to spend our time on. And if we spend a lot of time finding the class high average and the person that's going to go to the knowledge bowl and all that other stuff, right? But
that wasn't
why
me.
don't we? Guess what? Clearly, neither of us. But why don't we take a step back? Take a look at the laws that are already in place and conduct realistic rehearsals. If all your rehearsals are at bang, then guess what? Some of the times you're going to win, and some of the times the bad guy's going to win. But if you move that dial back, Brian, and you start talking about pre-event indications and a level of seriousness, and you talk about reasonable suspicion and probable cause, your life is going to get easier, and you're going to stop a lot of bad things from happening. One day you're going to step out of your front door, and a meteor splinter is going to hit you right between the eyes, no matter if you turn left or right. But almost everything else in your life is predictable and preventable.
Right.
Yeah. And preventable. I would add both of those.
Yeah, that's true.
Hey, look, real quick, Brian. I know we're coming in for a landing here,
yeah.
but let's take a look at Kip Kinkle. Okay,
Mhm.
Kip Kinkle bitched to his parents till he got a gun and then used the gun to kill his parents. Klebold and Harris locked their room from their parents because they illegally bought guns and stored them in their rooms. Adam Lanza, if you don't buy me a gun, these are the consequences of my action. Listen, the kid in Marjorie Stoneman Douglas, the same thing. Couldn't wait to buy their gun. Look, I couldn't wait to buy a gun because I had these visions of hunting and being able to take down my first deer in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. And I had planned on it my entire life. I didn't plan on an extended tubular magazine so I could go to my school and erase all the hate or something. So, Brian, your thing about perspective is well taken. I'm just saying, folks, you got to step back and take a look at the big picture and what likely spirals are on the table in front of
you. You're getting into the parenting aspect of this, which is obvious that most of these kids had horrible parent. If there's a parent listening to this podcast right now, they probably don't have the kid with the problem. You know what I'm saying? I totally
agree with that.
If
you're allowing the school to raise your kids, thank God for our school system.
Yeah.
Thank God for our schools and our parents and our resource officers. People don't think we're bashing our cops and our lawyers and our judges. What we're just trying to do is shine a light on some of the apprehensions that people have that force them not to act, and the laws that allow people to think they can act. To what end? I would ask. To what end?
I agree. So we kind of covered a lot. I'll put the links to some of these cases in the episode details for people to check out. And I know there's so much more we could get into with this, but I think hopefully our comparison with these different types of cases offered a perspective that maybe you didn't see or hear before, or kind of opened up your eyes a little bit and go, okay, I see what you're getting at here. We don't need to look for something new. We need to master the things that we already have right now.
Totally agree. Absolutely.
So I hopefully that did that. We did cover a lot. Do you have anything else to add, Greg?
If you're in a school environment, teachers and administrators can search you without either permission or a warrant, and they don't have to call your parents. Folks, if you're mixed up about that, look up New Jersey versus TLO, and you know what? Show up at your school and ask questions. I love parents that show up and ask questions, right?
Yeah.
But be prepared for the answers, right?
Yeah. But go to only do that if you have kids at the school and it's your school.
That's probably a good plan.
Well, there's a lot going on right now where people
I'm going to drive to Ohio and show up
school board meetings, and they don't even live there and they don't even have kids there, and you're like, okay, you guys, we could a little less of that in society.
Hey, thanks everybody for tuning in. Brian, I don't know how to broach the topic. I'm sure you have on the site somewhere or on social media, but we got interviewed by by two wonderful folks on the Behavior Bitches
The
podcast.
behavior bitches. Yeah, I'm sharing that, but
Please.
I'll put that link in there too. If you guys want to listen to a good one with the behavior bitches, they were
Not
so
our
much
word.
fun. No, that's them. That's, I even felt bad. Like I said, posted, I was like, can I call them bitches?
Oh,
Because
and we had another good one with Adam Parr, and
we
this
did.
time this time his good friend Paul Fortune. So that's another good one. So folks, please, if you like it, say something.
Yeah. So we'll share all that. Check that out. And then of course we always have the Patreon site, which has
Yep.
even more on it and all kinds of episode extras, behind the scenes stuff, and some cool info that we like to share with just those who support the show. So everyone, thank you so much for tuning in. We do appreciate it. Share it with your friends. Please leave us a review. It does help, but only a good one.
Yeah, exactly. We don't need constructive criticism. We're doing fine.
Well, I'll take
Yeah.
constructive criticism, but not
No,
just
it's
I don't
all,
like these guys.
there is no such thing.
All right. All right. Thanks everyone for tuning in.
We love you.
Don't forget that training changes behavior.